Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and this is The Joys and Perils of the Short Story. I started writing Tales from the Triverse in the summer of 2021, and didn't finish until January of this year. 4.5 years working on a serial, with each chapter building upon what came before. This month I began working on my first post-Triverse fiction. I'll include an extract at the end of this. After wrapping Triverse, I knew I didn't want to immediately embark on another mega project. It was time, at last, to poke at the short story ideas that have buzzed around my head for years without having an outlet. I'm strict on keeping to one project at a time, as I'm far too easily distracted by new and shiny things. So I've had a list of ideas for shorts that has been waiting for Triverse to end. Being someone who's obsessed with structure, I've enjoyed working on something that exists at the opposite end of the spectrum to a huge serial. The short story is such a different beast to the long-form serial, and it's been fun to force myself outside of my comfort zone. Scaffolds and foundations. I can never quite decide upon the right metaphor. When writing a serial, earlier chapters inform the ongoing writing and the reading, such that you're never writing into a vacuum. The blank page doesn't really exist for the serial fiction writer, because we're always building upon what's come before. The preparation for a serial is the foundation, working out the themes, the characters, the plot. In the case of speculative fiction, building the world. It's difficult to construct a coherent serial story without that foundation in place, although the depth is down to your own preferences. The foundation helps avoid the serial collapsing under its own weight, and you can spot plot holes and other traps ahead of time and fix them up front. The longer a serial goes on, the larger the structure becomes. As with a tall building, there are different stages of completion. Some floors are all done, others are mid-construction, and some haven't yet been started. This is where the scaffolding comes in, helping to maintain structure on the newest, wobbliest sections. In other words, everything that comes before helps to support what comes after. Beginning a serial is intimidating because you're building both the foundations and the scaffold at the same time. Back in 2021, it was an open question whether I was up to the task of writing Tales from the Triverse. I hadn't written crime fiction before, or designed a serial as an anthology, with episodic procedural stories. 3 months in, I knew the foundations were going to hold. 6 months down the line, the scaffold was built, wrapping around the structure of the serial, stretching up and foreshadowing events yet to come. That scaffold would remain in place for 4 years, ensuring that the building went up straight, and that no construction workers fell to their deaths. Yes, I am stretching this metaphor somewhat. In 2025, I began removing the scaffold because I was entering the final stages of the story. The building existed, the lights were on, all the soft furnishings were looking comfy. Fast forward to now, and I'm a month and a bit past completing Triverse, and my focus is on my new short story, as yet untitled. My excitement at working on something new is tempered by the sudden screeching realization that I have no foundation and no scaffold. You've got one shot. A long-form serial is a major commitment and the pressure is real, but that pressure is also naturally spread out across a long period of time. If an individual chapter of a serial is a little subpar, it isn't a massive problem as long as the next chapter is a return to form. There's an ebb and flow to a serial whereby it doesn't necessarily need to be at 100% all of the time. The pressure from writing a serial is therefore in sustaining it over the duration. Individual moments, the day-to-day or week-to-week writing are less intense. There's always a chance to refocus next week, right? As I'm now remembering, short stories don't have that safety net. The challenge is inverted. The story is a one-off. It's not going to consume years of my life, but only has a single opportunity to land. A short story is good, or it isn't. There's no course correction, no part 2. Characters must be defined within the span of the story. Same for the themes, which can't be explored over 90,000 words. The story has to fit into the tighter word count. There's an efficiency required by the short story, which is quite different discipline to what I've been doing for the last 5 years. At the same time, this doesn't mean simply compressing everything into fewer words. That would read like a novella set to 4 times speed. The good news is that this all comes back to my favourite part of writing, the puzzle solving. Fiction or non-fiction, writing tends to be an endless series of tricky puzzles, with the process of solving them resulting in the desired output. I should note at this point the obvious elephant in the room. Many of you listening to this already know all this. There are many expert short story writers publishing their work online, and the format is in many ways a more natural fit for newsletter distribution. It's considerably easier to find readers who will commit to a single one-and-done story than it is to a multi-part, multi-month serial. This is a relatively new experience for me, though. I haven't written any standalone short stories since 2014, which was in the distant past before I'd written any serials. I was a very inexperienced writer back then, and most of the short stories from that period are decidedly naff. It wasn't until the experiment of A Day of Faces kicked off my serial fiction obsession in 2015 that I started taking my writing more seriously. In case you aren't keeping track, 2014 was 12 years ago. Horrifying. But the point is, I have a lot to learn, which is what makes writing this new short story so exciting. No more guardrails. The truth of the scaffold metaphor I clumsily invoked earlier is that it's as much a constraint as a support. It certainly makes it easier to produce an ongoing series with a new chapter each week, but there are inherent boundaries. Tales from the Triverse could be many things by design, but each of its tales still had to cohere and make sense within the established framework. I was telling a larger story too, which meant staying at least vaguely close to the path. All of those restrictions are cast off. This new short story is free to go wherever it pleases. It's a blank slate with new characters, a new setting. It can be about anything. It could be intimidating, but the joy of a new project is precisely in that discovery, of venturing into the unknown. I had this experience with Triverse back in 2021 when I was starting out, before it developed into muscle memory. Anyway, for those of you more experienced in the craft of the short story, please do share your top advice in the comments over on the newsletter. I almost certainly need it. And meanwhile, here's that extract from the opening of the thing I'm working on, which currently is simply called Untitled Short Story and is absolutely a work in progress. Everyone's priorities shift when nobody can breathe. Air being a precious commodity focuses the mind. It was always there at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, taken for granted and ignored, right up until our lungs started burning, kids and old people began dropping dead from asphyxiation, and all the birds fell out of the sky. The new hierarchy is simple. Physiological needs first, then safety needs, tribalism, revenge, catharsis. I'm at revenge. Pay is fine, but I do it for the love. Getting to England was a challenge. The channel is still littered with mines and barbed wire, which meant no inflatables and taking it slow. They like to keep people out, the Brits. Once I'm past Dover, I'm in. Nobody gives a white man in his 30s a second glance as I board the lonely train that heads north, past what used to be London. East Anglia fell into the sea 40 years ago. It was one of the first to go after the ice broke up. Despite that, you still get pocket communes of crazies and hermits, living in the marshes and on what few raised islands remain. If they can keep clear of cholera and typhoid and dodge malaria when the bugs swarm out in the summer, there are worse places to exist. No surprise then that the target is holed up here. It's off the grid. Being a shithole has its perks. A low population density means fewer eyes, fewer sightings, fewer reports. William Fisher was the last CEO of British Petrochemicals in the 2050s, which put him in the original top 20. Most of the headliners were crossed off years ago, but Fisher's always been in the wind. I hire a boat from a skinny boy in Thetford, right on the edge of the marshes, and at the termination point of the railway. It's a single-seat solar motor job, and looks as if the bottom could fall out at any moment. The kid assures me it's fully charged, and I head out. Rivers are a loose concept in Norfolk. What used to be the little Ouse now blends into the River Thet and the Waveney. All the banks broken, the floodplains breached, a land desperate to return to the sea. Eastwards takes me past the rooftops of Diss, chimneys poking out above the waterline. Long submerged streets are invisible through the brown water, reflections of grey skies broken only by reeds and ducks. There's a splash and a sickly otter lifts its head, regarding me disdainfully before vanishing. It takes 3 hours to reach the settlement, a collection of buildings on stilts, surrounding a raised area of land that protrudes up from the water. In all directions it's a green-flecked ocean, the mainland beyond the horizon, and no discernible line between here and the bloated span of the English Channel. There are trees, grasses, reeds, lined up like fencing, but otherwise it's a flat nothing. Another couple of decades and it will be gone altogether. There's a dock on the tiny island, which now I'm close is clearly more of a sandbank, and I'm impressed that it can support any kind of structure at all. Eyes watch my boat as I approach, peeking from behind the darkened windows of the houses out in the water. The building on the island looks like it's serving the job of a village hall. Maybe it's where they all shelter when the storms come through. The doors are unlocked and I enter without knocking, finding inside a congregation of sorts, seated on old school benches. I walk the length, looking for the target, his face clear in my memory. The photos were decades old, but I've a knack for aging them up. He's in the front row. William Fisher. The instinctual response confirms his identity. "Who are you?" He's an old man, in his 80s probably, nearly gone. White hair, sunken cheeks, drooping ears. So many of the original list are old, which is why we've all been pushing so hard to clean up the leaderboard. To let time take them would be a crime all its own. You are charged and found guilty of crimes against Mother Earth, I say, the words coming easily, well rehearsed. Your treason against your own species carries the sentence of death. I will be your executioner today. The decrepit man creaks to his feet and tries to push past me to get to the doors, to be anywhere else, even though there's nowhere to run. He can't swim to salvation. Not from me. I pull my gun and activate the charge. Your complicity in the destruction of the planet has been confirmed by a panel of independent scientific judges. Your family traces back 3 generations in oil drilling and export. You have directly contributed to the atmospheric cataclysm. This verdict is final. A shot to the head puts him down and he bleeds out on the floor of the hall. I snap a photo. The guy on the little stage at the front is shouting. The other settlers have jumped up from their pews and are backing away. I ignore them and leave, get back in my boat, turn it around and head back to the remains of civilization. It's dark by the time the lights of Thetford Station come into view. I hit signal coverage and upload the kill, getting that reliable little thrill as my score ticks up. I refresh and pick a new target. To be continued. Thanks for listening, everyone. Do head over to the newsletter where you can leave comments and all of that good stuff. And yeah, if you've got tips on how to make a good short story, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Okay, bye-bye.